Hello kids, and welcome back to the story of Western philosophy. So far, our tale has painted a lively picture of the Greek philosophic world. Thales and Anaximander are having a spirited debate while Anaximenes tries to keep the peace. Pythagoras is having his cult meetings, denouncing beans and orgies. Heraclitus is gambling with children and insulting their parents. Parmenides is judging people from his mountaintop. And Empedocles is screaming that he's going to jump into a volcano. The story feels like it's progressing nicely, but little does everyone know a narrative-altering shift is imminent. Socrates is about to corrupt some youth and become a martyr. Plato is about to immortalize his story in his poetic dialogues, and together this power couple will be so monumental that all before them will be branded the presocratics and neglected by countless philosophy students to come. However, trapped between these two worlds are three more important philosophers: Anaxagoras, Democritus, and Protagoras. Though technically still pre-Socratics, their lives overlapped with Socrates, so they serve a unified secondary purpose in addition to the importance of their philosophies. Together, they set the stage for Socrates. They bring his setting to life: Athens. These are the pre-Socratics of the golden age of Athens. Our story begins with a young Anaxagoras who just moved to this efflorescent city-state on the rise, eager to make a name for himself. But where to start? Anaxagoras agreed with the Parmenidean view that there is no becoming, only being. But this begs the question: how does one account for change throughout time? People are born and people die. However, this change cannot be becoming. Instead, it must be the mixture of being. For example, according to my friend Empedocles, the universe is the mixture of four elements: fire, earth, water, and air. So if we took little Theodorus here and chopped him up into little pieces, you could theoretically separate all these elements. But why stop at just four elements? Why not have everything in everything? After all, we can't turn food into flesh when we consume it, destroying food and creating flesh. That would be becoming. So food must contain flesh within it. These things contained within substances I will call seeds. Let me start from the very beginning. In the beginning, all was one apiron mixture, until nous, or mind, set that mixture into a rotary motion. This rotation caused seeds in the mixture to shift and separate off, forming all that is. For Anaxagoras, this apiron mixture is everything contained in everything, all in one undifferentiated whole. Every pair of opposites contained in the same infinitely small or infinitely large substance. But when the mixture is differentiated or set into motion by mind, certain seeds in this mixture are predominant, making those seeds apparent when we perceive a given thing. This is easy enough to understand until we learn that Anaxagoras' seeds aren't just pairs of opposites, but also natural materials, substances like metals, earth, food, and flesh. When we see lava, we see that hot and earth are temporarily predominant, but in that lava there is also infinite coldness and blueness and water. There is everything contained in everything. What really, in my opinion, makes Anaxagoras important was first his attempt to account for change while denying becoming, just like Empedocles, but second, the idea that mind is what sets everything in motion. With this philosophy, Anaxagoras quickly became the most famous philosopher in the city, and a founding father of the philosophic scene in Athens. However, Athens wasn't the democratic utopia it appeared to be. Below the cultural bustling was the contentious power struggles of a direct democracy. Anaxagoras, this innocent philosopher, became caught in the political crossfires because of his friendship with Pericles, a famous democratic politician. He was convicted of impiety for preaching that the sun was a red-hot stone, and was banished from Athens. Anaxagoras returned to his homeland in Ionia with a broken heart and died. His final wish was that his death be celebrated by school children annually as a holiday, which it was. Anaxagoras was a wholesome character, but one young philosopher had some serious beef with his ridiculous speculations. His name was Democritus, an absolute savage and a brilliant scientific mind. Democritus publicly tore Anaxagoras' arguments to shreds, calling them ancient and even accusing him of appropriating them. Anaxagoras was so terrified of Democritus, he repeatedly ducked any public debates with him. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, much of Democritus's work was lost, but we do know a little bit about him. He was said to be a big fan of Pythagoras. His primary claim to fame was his and Leucippus's theory of the atom. He believed everything was either made of indivisible particles called atoms or else the void. Again, like Empedocles and Anaxagoras before him, this is viewed by many as an attempt to respond to the challenge that was Parmenides' philosophy, an argument that change in this world isn't illusory. It is simply a rearrangement of some fundamental constant, the atom for Democritus. Democritus believed that everything happened in accordance with natural laws, and that the soul too is made of atoms. Although he had no fanciful cosmology, he represents a big step towards scientific rigor, the future establishment of mechanistic laws of nature. He also famously theorized that just as our Earth was formed by atoms coming together, other worlds likely have formed in the void as well. As far as ethics are concerned, he believed that cheerfulness was the goal of life, and regarded meditation and culture as the best means towards it. It is said by Diogenes that Democritus had a very important student, whose name was Protagoras. Protagoras wasn't like other girls. Where other philosophers saw danger in the chaotic democracy of Athens, Protagoras saw opportunity. Political turmoil is fought primarily in the courts, and the greatest political weapon was rhetoric. This climate allowed for a small group of individuals referred to as the sophists to gain prominence. Who were the sophists? They were traveling teachers of law, philosophy, and rhetoric, refiners of the political weapons that countless would have to use to defend themselves and to get what they want, their argumentative technique. They profited off their teaching abilities. The most famous of these sophists was Protagoras. His most famous dictum was, "Man is the measure of all things. Of things that are, that they are, and of things that are not, that they are not." Everyone around him nodded in agreement, with reverent appreciation for his rhetorical abilities and how profound what he had just said was, even though deep down it was so frustratingly vague that no one really knew exactly what he meant based on that statement alone. Many treat it as the claim that knowledge is sensation. Man is the measure of all things. Just as things appear for me, so too it is for me, and just as things appear to you, so too again for you. If the room appears cold to me, it is cold. If it appears hot to you, it is hot. Honey to a person who is ill tastes bitter, so it's true that honey is bitter, while to someone who is healthy it tastes sweet, so it is also true that honey is sweet. This all makes sense. However, when we get more context from some of Protagoras' other statements, we find that we can't reduce his claims to the epistemic belief that knowledge is sensation, because Protagoras doesn't just talk about sensation, he also talks about culture. In a culture where stealing is deemed acceptable, stealing is acceptable. Where it is deemed morally wrong, it is morally wrong. This leads some to consider Protagoras a skeptic. Others, like Schiller, a founder of pragmatism, considered him a pragmatist, because Plato suggests the interpretation of Protagoras that one opinion can be better than another, though it cannot be truer. I personally am torn between a pluralist interpretation and a relativist interpretation, but rather than overwhelming you with information, I'm going to say that he is a relativist and continue the story, because that's how he will be viewed by many to come. Relativism is the view that whether something is true or false, right or wrong, depends on the context or convention. This is the antithesis of absolutism, the belief in universal absolute truths. In the sophists' view, each argument has two sides, true or false, and both can be successfully argued. This seems like an awfully convenient philosophy for a sophistic career. With this philosophy, Protagoras could reformulate his job as not to find one objective truth like the philosophers before him, but to teach people how to argue their truths in the Athenian courts convincingly. This made his philosophy very popular in his time. This also makes him the villain of the story in the mind of other prominent philosophers. Democritus, for example, finds Protagoras on the street teaching some lad who recently has caught a case and taps him on the shoulder. "Protagoras, you bring shame to my name. What you are saying is absolute nonsense. If all statements are true, then it is also true that your philosophy is bogus and wrong. It's self-refuting. You're not a real philosopher." It is harsh to be scorned by your own teacher, but Protagoras wiped his tears with his fat stacks of drachma and carried on. The theme of rejecting one authoritative truth is also contained in perhaps Protagoras' second most famous saying. Concerning the gods, I have no means of knowing whether they exist or not, nor of what sort they may be, because of the obscurity of the subject and the brevity of human life. He wrote this in his book, pride swelling in his chest, but at this point the populace believed he went it too far. You don't believe in the gods? His books were burned in the streets and he was sentenced to death. He too had fallen prey to the very democracy that he tried to take advantage of. But our courageous Protagoras wouldn't just roll over and die at their hands. In the night he escaped, getting in a ship sailing from Athens. He was home free until his ship sank and he died. Democritus was the only one of the three left. It is said that he lived to the age of 109, and towards the end, when he was at death's door, his sister was like, "Hey, can you wait to die after the festival of Thesmophoria?" To which he replied, "Sure." So to stay alive, he ordered warm loaves to be brought to him every day for him to apply to his nostrils and to get a hearty whiff. The sweet aroma of carbohydrates kept him going until after the festival, when he painlessly slipped away. Thus our philosopher met his end. Join me next time to discuss the life and philosophy of Socrates and Plato. And if you are feeling kind and want to help out the channel, feel free to hit the like button and leave a comment below. Thank you guys. Bye.